Thank you for having me here. Today I'm going to talk about the topic of gamification and behavioral design. My name is Chou. So a quick background on myself. I started working in this field now known as gamification since 2003, and it made me an early pioneer in the industry. So back then it was a lonely passion. People didn't really understand it or believe in it. They thought I was trying to create more excuses to play games. But I believed in the power of game design to change desired behavior. So I stuck to it. I was very blessed that over a few years, this became something that a lot of companies, governments, nonprofits, schools cared about. And they looked around, and I happened to be one of the few people who have been doing it for so long. And so, and I was also lucky enough to have a few organizations in Europe and other places call me the top gamification guru in the world in a few places. And I've worked with quite a few different companies. If we're lucky, you might recognize a couple of them. Also wrote a book called Actionable Gamification. That link just takes you to Amazon, or if you just go on Amazon, search for gamification, should be the first result. I'm not sure here in the Netherlands, though. If this talk is interesting, that's where you can check out more. So before we talk about gamification, I'd like to start with games. Who plays games? A lot of people, when they think of a gamer, they think about people like these. Little kids and guys who are probably single, probably unemployed, and eat pizza onto their jeans. But the average gamer nowadays can be surprising to some people. The average gamer is now 35 years old. 68% of them are over 18. 47% of these gamers, almost half, are women, especially if you look at social mobile games like Candy Crush or Angry Birds, Farmville. So there's actually more adult women playing games than males under 18. So what does this mean? If you look at this demographic, that's a pretty generic demographic, right? 35-year-old average, half are female. This basically says that everyone has the capacity to enjoy games. Now, not everyone plays games because some people think it's for kids, some people think it's a waste of time, they have something better to do. But through my research, as long as you give people a reason to, everyone has the capacity to enjoy games. And actually, I believe that everyone needs to play some kind of game in their life. For some people, it's their work, which is why they become workaholics. They hate taking vacations. For some people, it's the stock market. For some, it's the football games and basketball games. That's why they know all the stats, or coupon clipping. And so usually when you cannot find a game that's worth playing in the real world, that's when you go to the digital world, because there's all these things that appeal to our psychology that we actually need. So what is gamification? Gamification is applying all those fun, exciting things of game design and applying that into what we call non-game / boring context. Things that you have to do, but you don't necessarily want to do. Things like education, training, things like healthcare, productivity. And so it's really about making productivity activities fun. So I believe at the center of gamification is something I call human-focused design, as opposed to function-focused design. Most systems are function-focused. It assumes that people in the system will take the desired behavior, and then you optimize for efficiency, for usability, for ergonomics. So it's a little bit like a factory, where you assume that people in the factory will do the work, right? Because you pay them to do it, and then you figure out how to maximize your production, efficiency, maybe make sure it's safe. The human-focused design remembers that people in the system have feelings, they have motivations, they have insecurities, they have reasons why they do or do not want to do something, and it optimizes for that. So that's a little bit more like a theme park, where you design it to be really, really fun, and then you can predict that people automatically want to line up for hours and hours just to enjoy the experience. Now, what's interesting here is that in the case of a factory, you're paying these employees to do relatively mundane work of factory work. When I was doing my workshop with Tesla, I had to, I'm sure you guys have fun factory work. But the case of the theme park, they're actually paying you to stand in lines for hours and hours just to enjoy that few minutes of fun experience. So the reason why we call this gamification is because I believe the gaming industry is the first to master human-focused design. Because there's no real purpose to playing a game, right? You never have to play a game. So because games have spent decades or even centuries, depending on how you qualify a game, figuring out how to get people to come back for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day doing repetitive activities such as throwing out a bird, throwing out a bird, throwing out a bird, or matching 3 gems, matching 3 gems, matching 3 gems. Over and over again, when there's no mandated purpose, we're now learning from that discipline, and that's why we call this gamification. Now, like I said, I started very early. Back then, it was a very lonely passion. I became very lucky where over the years, I started getting a lot of opportunities to talk about and teach a lot of organizations, from the government to the Kingdom of Bahrain, to China, to Israel and the US, Australia, just all over the place, and in all kinds of industries, hospitality, productivity, healthcare, hospitals, things like that. And there's a lot of gamification case studies that are out there right now. I put together a page that have 90+ cool gamification case study with ROI stats. So it'll say, Google did this gamification thing and they increased their core metric by 47%. SAP did this. So love to talk about a lot of these examples, but unfortunately we don't have the time to do that. So it's a page for reference. So we know a lot of companies are interested in gamification now. Now there's still a big problem, which is a lot of companies, they think gamification is cool, but they're very much focused on this fancy term we call game mechanics or game design elements. Things like points, badges, leaderboards, and to a wider extent, narrative, quests, leveling up. And they think, oh, if we just put these points or badges or quests into my product, into my workflow, it automatically becomes fun and successful. And that's actually not how it works, right? Because if you think about it, every single game in the market has game elements in them. But most games are still not fun. Most games are boring and they're failures. And only a few well-designed games achieve mass success. So it's not realistic to say that, hey, if I just take these game elements that are even found in boring games and put into my product, suddenly it's amazing, exciting. My marketing is so great now. So I spent many years researching exactly what makes a game successful. And I like to study different games that are clones of each other. They look almost identical, but somehow one is very successful, one's a failure. And I noticed a few things. Number one, it's not because one game has game elements, right? They're clones, they both have quests, they both have leveling up, but one is a failure, one's successful. Number two, it's not even because of the graphics. Sometimes the visually stunning game becomes a huge failure, and the relatively ugly game achieves mass success. If you look at Minecraft or RuneScape, a lot of times not the best type of graphics. So what I end up realizing is that all the successful games out there have now what I call the 8 core drives of motivation. So I created this framework. It's called the Octalysis framework, and it's called that because it's analysis based on an octagon shape. And so I realized that all the successful games has these 8 core drives. And so inside, there's these 8 core drives of motivation. Outside, it's probably hard to see. There's a list of examples of different game design elements and techniques that can bring out those core drives. Now, what's unique here is that every single thing you do, inside or outside of a game, is based on one or more of these 8 core drives, which means that if there's none of these 8 core drives here, there's zero motivation. No behavior happens. You guys will not be in here in this room without these core drives. Your customers aren't buying, your employees aren't working. Nothing happens without these 8 core drives. So we're going to go through these 8 of them, and then we're going to talk about the different natures of those core drives. Some are what we call white hat, makes people feel powerful but no urgency. Some are called black hat, which drives urgency but doesn't make people feel great. So the first core drive is called epic meaning and calling. So this is the core drive that says we're motivated because we feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. So this is, for instance, why people contribute to Wikipedia. We know that people don't contribute to Wikipedia because they can make money, right? But they don't even do it to update their resumes, advance their careers. People sometimes spend hours after work contributing, updating Wikipedia because they believe they're protecting humanity's knowledge, something bigger than themselves. And this is a theme that's often seen in games, right? In a game, they'll tell you, hey, the world's about to end, but somehow you're the only person qualified to save the world. It's very motivating and engaging. It's like, oh, I have to go do this. It drives a lot of motivation and behavior. Core drive 2 is development and accomplishment. So this is the drive that says we feel motivated because we're leveling up, we're improving ourselves, we're achieving mastery. And so this is where most of the points and badges fall into. So points are just counters, right? It shows a sense of progress. So even though you're doing the same things over and over and over again, at least you see this progress bar moving up or this number growing and you feel like you're getting somewhere. Badges are basically what we call achievement symbols. So achievement symbols symbolize accomplishment. And they can be many different forms. They can be badges, uniform changes, crowns, trophies, black belt, white belt for martial art. But the key is that it must symbolize an accomplishment. If there's no accomplishment there, If you give people a badge for every silly thing they do, then it actually is insulting. So that's the key. You have to have the core drives more so than the game design techniques. And so eBay is actually one of the most well-known, but people don't think about gamified e-commerce sites, right? If you think about a generic e-commerce site, it's not necessarily intuitive to have this competitive bidding system, this mutual feedback system, and this path to level up to go from a yellow star seller to a purple star seller to a power rated seller. So I remember when I started my first eBay business, my first year in college, I sold 10 things, got 10 positive feedback, and they mailed me a certificate supposedly signed by the CEO. And at the time, I was so excited, I printed it out and put it on my wall. I felt really proud about it. It's probably still with my parents somewhere. But even on the buyer side, the thing about eBay is that when you buy something on eBay, you didn't just buy something, right? Because anyone with money can buy stuff. That's not an accomplishment. No, when you buy something on eBay, you feel like you won. Sure, maybe you overpaid by 10, 15% than you would otherwise pay for this item, but at least you beat those 10 other bastards that are bidding against you, right? It's like, take that, suckers, I overpaid for my product. And it sounds funny, but that's what literally people say. I have friends who say, no, my bid is way too high. There's no way this guy can outbid me, right? He's bragging about how much money he's gonna pay for this product. And so that's why they say eBay is a very addictive experience. You're always logging in, saying, oh, does someone outbid me? Does someone give a new bid for my product, et cetera, et cetera. We also see that in Twitter. So a lot of people remember Twitter's innovation being that it created limit messages to 140 characters. But a lot of people forget that Twitter also pioneered the one-way follow. Before Twitter, most social networks were two-way follows, two-way connections. You invite me to be a friend on Facebook, and I don't want to make you feel bad, so I accept, and we're both friends now. But Twitter comes out and says, no. You can follow me, but I don't have to follow you back. So if 1 million people follow me and I follow 0 people back, then I'm super awesome, right? I'm like a rock star. And this is why, for instance, Ashton Kutcher would challenge CNN to see who can become 1 million followers on Twitter. And so the problem with something like Twitter back in the day is they're always stuck in Silicon Valley, and only people who read TechCrunch or Mashable know about them. But because a mainstream celebrity is challenging a mainstream news channel, suddenly all the other people, the girls who like Ashton Kutcher, people watching this, they're familiar with Twitter. And so the key is that Twitter made this feel like an accomplishment. It is actually hard to gain followers, and that's why they care so much about it. Core Drive 3 is empowerment of creativity and feedback. So this is it's kind of like Lego, where you give users the basic components, and there's an infinite amount of ways for them to use their creativity, try different strategies, see feedback, and then go back and adjust. And so this has a lot of implication in education. A lot of times if you look at kids who play card games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, a lot of times there's over 1,000 cards. Each card has 2 to 6 numbers like attack, defense. And the kids who play this well not only knows every single card, they know things like your card counters my card counters his card. And if you think about it, that's actually more information than the periodic table. It's like these kids not only memorize every single element, they memorize the exact placement, the exact weight, and exactly how every single element interacts with each other. And it's mind-blowing. It's like these kids are geniuses. But when you ask them, oh, so what is the 4th element? They're like, oh, I don't know, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, right? They have no clue. And it's not because they suddenly went from a genius to an idiot, it's because of change in motivation. When they study for their tests, they're only trying to get their acceptable grade, and they try to get there, and they stop, and they probably go and play games after. But when you play a game, every single thing you memorize allows you to become more powerful, allows you to come up with new strategies, beats your friends. And if, as a means to an end, you have to memorize a lot of stuff, that's not only acceptable, that's actually enjoyable. It's very important. Core Drive 4 is ownership and possession. So this is the drive that says because we feel like we own something, we want to improve it, we want to protect it, we want to get more of it. So this is, for instance, dealing with things like virtual goods, virtual currencies. It's also why we like to collect baseball cards or collect stamps. It's also what drives us to want to accumulate wealth. And so one of the game design techniques in Core Drive 4 ownership is a collection set. So you have things like the Monopolies, or McDonald's Monopoly game, where when you go to some places, McDonald's, and you buy some food, they give you a piece of property on the Monopoly board. And if you collect all of them, you'll get a major prize. So a lot of people reportedly said they don't even care about the food, but they go to McDonald's a lot because they want to complete that collection. And some people are even willing to spend real money to buy the parts they don't have, even though the parts by themselves are not worth anything. So that's a collection set design. It makes the process more interesting, more fun. Core drive 5 is social influence and relatedness. So this is basically everything you do based on what other people do, think, or say. So this deals with things like competition, collaboration, appreciation, gifting. And it also has this relatedness piece, which deals with things like nostalgia. Like if you see a product that reminds you of your childhood, you automatically have a higher chance of buying the product. If you meet someone from the same hometown, let's say you're traveling, you have a higher chance of striking a deal with that person. And one of the key things we know is social norming. So we like to behave similar to what others, the same ways people that are similar to us are behaving. So this is a utility app called Power. And so they're trying to get people to use less energy. And they tried all sorts of different messages, and none of it worked. And they saw the one thing that worked really well is to tell them, hey, look, this is where you're at, this is where your average neighbor's at, and this is where your best neighbor's at. And when people said, whoa, I know I'm not some kind of world-changing savior, but how can I be worse than Bob down the street? That makes no sense. And suddenly, a lot of people changed their behavior, and they saved over $200 million worth of energy within a couple years. We know Amazon uses this technique, right? Amazon reports that 60% of all their revenue comes from someone clicking one of those recommendation little links. And what does that say? It says, people who view this product also viewed this, right? People who bought this product also bought this. They're basically saying, hey, people who are just like you are spending their money here. So probably you should spend your money here too, right? Social influence design. And of course, we know on Amazon, everyone likes the reviews. The study shows that we don't trust the professional critics as much as we trust people who are just like us, who just say, no, this is awesome, I like it, versus the well-written pieces, because there's more of that relatedness. And you probably can't see, but here it actually says that this is a review by a top 1,000 reviewers. So on Amazon, there's also a leaderboard of reviewers trying to outcompete each other and gain status. Core drive 6 is scarcity and impatience. So this is the drive that says we want something simply because we can't have it or it's hard to obtain. So if grapes are on the table, we don't really care about those grapes. We might eat a few because it's convenient, but we don't value them. But if it's locked behind a glass shelf just beyond our reach, we're always thinking about those grapes. Are they sweet? Can I have them? When can I have them? And this is a strategy Facebook used when they first started. At the beginning, Facebook said, oh, thefacebook.com is only for Harvard students. If you don't go to Harvard University, too bad, can't use Facebook. Then it says, oh, we're going to open to a few Ivy League schools and some other schools that your high school buddies got in, but you were not smart enough to get in. Too bad. And then it opened up to more and more schools. So when it opened up to UCLA, where I was attending in 2004, everyone rushed in. Not because they already knew how great Facebook was, because no one has tried Facebook before, but that sheer exclusivity alone drove people to join. You're not allowed before, now you're finally allowed. This is also a drive where a lot of social mobile games used to monetize. So some people will say, I'll never go into these games and, spend real money on it. But then you start playing a game like Farmville and it starts to dangle this mansion in front of your face. And you're like, oh no, I need to spend 40 more hours of farming to be able to get this mansion. Oh wait, I just have to spend $10 and I get the mansion immediately. $10 to save 40 hours of my time. That's a no-brainer, right? And so suddenly, you're no longer spending $10 to buy some worthless pixels on your screen. You're spending $10 to save your time because you're a savvy person. You respect your time, right? And so it's a funny phenomenon with the scarcity type of designs. Core drive 7 is unpredictability and curiosity. So this is basically saying because we don't know what's going to happen next, we're always thinking about it. So this is, for instance, heavily utilized in the gambling industry. But whenever you have a sweepstakes program, a lottery, a raffle ticket system, we have this core drive. The drive that makes us want to finish a book or a movie, which is why we hate spoilers. And there's a lot of studies done on this core drive. The most famous one is called the Skinner box, where they showed that if they put a mouse inside a little box and they press a button, if food always comes out when the mice is pressing, then they'll stop when they're no longer hungry. But when they switch it to the point where the mouse is pressing the button, food may or may not come out, and sometimes two come out. What you'll see is the mouse will constantly pressing the button, regardless if it's hungry or not. It's just like messing with its brain. Will it come out? Will it come out? Will it come out? So there's like gambling addiction right there in the little Skinner box. And a lot of times you'll find different types of examples like Easter eggs or something like Chase Picks a Tab, where when you swipe with their Chase card, just a reward suddenly pops out and says, hey, we just paid for your bill. And because it's so unexpected, it makes people really want to enjoy it and come back and do it again, makes them want to swipe more. Core drive 8 is loss and avoidance, and this basically is you're doing something to avoid a loss. You don't want something bad to happen, and so you're just you're motivated by fear and whatnot. So you see that in Farmville, where within a few hours, if you don't go back, it'll show you very uninspired images of your crops dying. You have to click on them one at a time, and you're just like, your brain just says, never again, I will come back every 5 hours to harvest my crops. So, quick summary, those are the 8 core drives that motivate our behavior, and without those 8 core drives, no behavior happens. And you'll later on, when you dig into more of it, you'll notice that some of them, again, the white hat ones, the top ones, make people feel powerful, in control, they feel good, but there's no sense of urgency. The bottom ones make people feel urgent, obsessed, even addicted, but in the long run, it leaves a bad taste in their mouths because they feel like they're not in control of their own behavior. The left side, I call them left brain core drive versus the right side, the right brain core drives, where the left ones are results-oriented, extrinsic motivation. You do it for result, but you don't necessarily enjoy the activity. And the ones on the right brain deals with intrinsic motivation. You enjoy it so much that you're willing to just pay money just to experience. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to go through that, but I highly recommend you to check out the Octalysis, understand and apply that to all your projects, because this is where you make experiences engaging, fun, and motivating. Thank you very much.